Two things can be true at once. One, Dispatch is an exceptional game, with writing, animation, and voice performances that are all of the highest quality. Two, the game has a serious flaw in how it interprets the player's choices that can lead to a bad ending that comes out of nowhere and feels overly punitive. If you've played the game, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, and if you haven't yet played the game, stop here and play it first, because this video contains a lot of spoilers. I highly recommend it to anyone who likes choice-based narrative games, and any complaints I have going forward should be prefaced by saying that these are all relative nitpicks of a game that is on the whole phenomenal. So, what is the flaw? Before we get to it, we need to go back to the start, or close to the start. Let's talk first about the romance, and then about character arcs, particularly about how, on both fronts, the game presents them differently to how you might think. The game presents the player, the protagonist Robert, with two options for romance. Blonde Blazer, who is clean-cut, conventionally attractive, straightforward, and then Invisigal, who is edgy, exciting, and equal parts forward and vulnerable. I'm not going to talk about which one is the better choice, because instead I'm going to focus purely on their role in the story. So, from a script writing point of view, Blonde Blazer has two roles. Firstly, she delivers a bunch of exposition up front to involve Robert in the story and introduce the stakes. And then secondly, serves as a reasonable authority figure to both empower and support Robert in his work. Her relationship to Robert is actually entirely binary, in that the only possible relationship states you can have with her are either romanced or not. If you elect not to romance her, there are no consequences. She remains your friend and confidant, all the way until the end. As part of one of my replays for this video, I even tried to pick the worst possible option at every point when talking to her. But it's simply not possible for her to be anything other than Robert's close friend or romantic partner by the end of the game. From a narrative standpoint, the romance is also arbitrary, and Blonde Blazer really only has one ending. She survives and she trusts Robert. Invisigal's role in the game and her relationship with Robert is much more complicated. For now, let's just look at her ending states. Compared to Blonde Blazer's one ending, Invisigal has two. You have her heroic ending, where she decides to be a hero and attempts to sacrifice herself for Robert, or her villain ending, where she stabs Shroud to death and then leaves the team. Like Blonde Blazer, her ending states aren't contingent on her romance, but it should be clear that the game does not view these characters as equal in terms of complexity or importance. I'll get back to that in a moment, but first let's talk about the character arcs. You've got the token arcs of the Z-Teamers learning to work together to do good, but when it comes to tangible arcs, you might be surprised to learn that there aren't actually all that many. When it comes to basic personal arcs, you've got Waterboy finding his confidence, you've got Phenomaman finding his purpose, you've got your chosen Kiki and their villain turn, and then you've got Flambe and his slightly more nuanced act of accepting Robert despite their past. On the slightly more complex side, you've got Chase wrestling with bitterness and mistrust, to then ultimately choose to believe in good at, in his mind, the cost of his own life. Other than that, you've really only got two primary character arcs. The first of which, naturally, is Robert. He begins the game depressed and defeated, even before he loses the fight, because he has nothing left but revenge, and fully expects to simply die in the suit. Beyond the Shroud decision, Robert's main arc is finding a reason to live without Mecha Man, and beyond Mecha Man, something that the Z-Team provides. A romance partner could also serve as potent motivation, sure, but the writing is a little bit too sophisticated than to fall for the basic and slightly codependent notion of finding a reason to live through love. It's redeeming the Z-Team that gives him a higher purpose and ignites his passion for heroing again, even after he gets his suit back. By the end of the game, the troubled Z-Team saved the day as a professional unit and found family under his leadership, and Robert feels the sun rise on his life again for the first time in a while. The other major character arc is, of course, Invisigal, and she has the most nuance of all. She's presented initially as another ex-villain who joined the Phoenix program in an attempt to redeem her past, but the game gradually reveals that her feelings around it are far more complicated than the rest of the team. While all the other Z-Teamers are genuinely trying their best to reform, Invisigal isn't sure she can, and her self-doubt leads her to question if redemption is even possible. Of course, her past as the one perhaps most responsible for destroying Mecha Man complicates things, as does the later reveal that she was a double agent possibly the whole time. But overall her arc is the most complex in the game, not for its details, but because of its endings. She's the only character in the game who can have alternate endings to her arc. By now you might be able to see where I'm going with all of this. Invisigal is by far the most complex and important character in the game, even compared to the protagonist himself. And on the surface, this is fine. I like Invisigal and I appreciate her arc. The problem is that this complexity and the clear conclusion that she is the most important character in the game is only presented to the player at the very end of the game. This is the key flaw I mentioned earlier. The game's major cathartic payoff is not what the game communicates will be the major cathartic payoff. This brings me directly to the focus of this video, the choice in episode 7 to cut her from the team or not. Up until this point, the game presents the player and Robert with one task: redeem the Z-Team. We're introduced to a handful of characters, each of which has personal problems that have led them to villainy, and we're told to mentor these characters to be heroes. Each of them has had incidents and superficial arc moments, like Golem not respecting Robert's space, Flambe seeking revenge, and yes, Invisigal's confidence issues and doubts about redemption. Sona or Coop get a face heel turn, while the other comes to appreciate their place, and the best friend of whichever you kick has a short but prominent sequence of hating Robert. While Invisigal certainly gets extra attention, I falsely assumed this was because she was a romance option. I assumed that, romance option aside, all of the characters on the Z-Team were, narratively speaking, equal in importance, and the game was doling out character moments in a relatively even-handed way. I thought several, if not all of the individuals in the Z-Team would each have alternate endings. Of course, knowing the ending, it is incredibly obvious in hindsight that this is not true at all, and Invisigal is far more prominent than any of the others. But at the time of this key decision, I acted as a manager should. I put the needs of the larger team, a larger team of narrative equals, above Invisigal.
She shouldn't have done what she did. I think she should go, sir.
Who wants her to stay?
Just me. But the team is more important than any one of us, so I won't stand in the way.
The Phoenix program is specifically about preventing these ex-villains from going rogue, and Invisigal broke this golden rule. For this, she deserved to be cut, especially considering another member of the team was cut recently for far less. From a managerial perspective, giving Invisigal special treatment here would drop a nuke of resentment that the rest of the team may not recover from.
I think you should consider cutting her from the team. I can't help but think that we've already cut a hero for far less.
We had to send a message.
That's kind of my point.
To put everything we've been building at risk, and for what? I like the bitch, but she gotta go.
And by go, we mean cut. Just like you cut Coop.
Indeed, the game gives them a low morale debuff in the next shift, making it very clear that your special treatment has had this very effect. If you expect that special treatment would damage the rest of the team and threaten everything the team has worked for, and you view these characters as narrative equals, then the decision to cut Invisigal in this moment is clearly the right choice. And this is the game's flaw. Because while the game presents this choice as making a tough managerial call versus overruling your team to give Invisigal special treatment, behind the scenes this game thinks of this decision as, do you believe in Invisigal or not? This leads to what I said about the game paying off a different promise than the one it made. If you decide to cut Invisigal here, the game ignores the team management angle and reads the choice as you abandoning her intentionally. How do I know? I got Invisigal's villain ending in my first playthrough, and I was entirely taken by surprise given I'd supported her, motivated her, backed her up in arguments, and even leveled her to max during the gameplay. So, according to some highly in-depth research I undertook over several grueling months, the game has 4 choices that have a high positive impact on your relationship with Invisigal. In order, they are: go on a date with her instead of Blazer, reveal your identity after the bar fight, refuse to cut her from the team, and untie her in the final chapter. The date option is positive or neutral, whereas all the others will incur a hefty penalty if you pick the wrong choice, and I use the word wrong there intentionally. Besides the date, in terms of the math of the game, these choices aren't 2 viable alternatives, and are instead moral right and wrong decisions. What's more, some of these choices have additional consequences, the largest of which is the decision to cut her, which not only makes it easier to get negative approval in the next conversation, but also locks her out of participating in the subsequent dispatch section. You might ask, why does that matter? Well, because besides story elements, like helping her in fights with hacking, the largest contributor to her good ending score lies in the gameplay sections themselves. Whether or not she succeeds on missions, and whether or not you send her for additional training with Blazer, contributes quite a lot to her final tally. So, to return to the boardroom, the decision to cut her not only lands you with a fat penalty immediately, but it also makes it easy to lose more points in dialogue and impossible to gain those points back in the next gameplay section, creating additional indirect consequences for the cut her choice in a way that the other major choices don't have. Essentially, this decision is the biggest single choice you can make to contribute to her ending. And it definitely matters. Given I leveled her and supported her the entire rest of the game, it was seemingly this decision alone and its follow-on consequences that was enough to land me the villain ending. Not only the villain ending, but a big fat achievement saying that I had failed as a mentor. I understand what they were going for. They wanted you to recognize she was a special case and give her special attention. In hindsight, knowing she is the most important character, knowing that the game interprets that cutting scene mostly as a demonstration of Robert's faith, this ending makes sense by the game's internal logic. But as a first-time player, this logic was bonkers, and the ending took me completely by surprise. But even then, I was okay with this, until the game actively punishes the player for this ending, given that Invisigal kills Shroud and robs both Robert and the player of the choice to kill him or not. Invisigal is not only the most important character, but her character is so much more important that it overwrites the player's own agency if the game deems it appropriate. Robert must simply stand by and watch her arc complete in place of his moment with Shroud. As a player of a choice-based game, I think being denied one of the game's major choices is a pretty hefty punishment, particularly given the game spent time with Chase building up to this very decision. Even though there are other important choices for Invisigal's arc, I trace it back to this moment, in this decision to cut Invisigal or not, as the moment the game's understanding of what my choices were about deviated from my own understanding of those choices. The game, via exposition giver Blonde Blazer, asked me to manage the Z team in a tough but fair manner, and then it punished me for running the team in exactly that manner, with a strange amount of moral judgment. The story set up the Z team itself as the primary cathartic arc, only to reveal too late that only Invisigal mattered, and everything else falls into place no matter what choices you make. I think judging Robert and the player's morality solely by the ending of Invisigal's arc is a flaw in the writing. In my second playthrough, the one where I tried to ruin my relationship with Blonde Blazer with no success, I also elected to be as much of an aggressive arsehole as possible to just about everyone. Anytime a character offered friendship, I insulted them. Any opportunity for violence and aggression, I took it. When it came to Shroud, I killed him without hesitation, and I gloated to Blonde Blazer afterwards. Essentially, I was a terrible person, and in my mind, a terrible mentor. But guess what? I also romanced Invisigal, and threw the team under the bus to protect her at their expense. And this time, I got Invisigal's heroic ending. Well done, says the game. Standing in the blood of the man I murdered, the game declared me the moral mentor. And all it took to achieve this was understanding that the game only values Invisigal, and nothing else matters. All of the other characters, Robert, Blonde Blazer, the Z-Team, they all complete their positive arcs no matter what. Only Invisigal and the choices surrounding her have any real impact on the ending, and the game views her ending as the only element in judging whether or not you get the good ending, and whether or not you're allowed to even make a choice about Shroud. Once I realized that, my appreciation for the game did fall a little, as it seems we're not as far from the choices don't matter telltale era as I thought. And that stinks. As an aside, romancing Invisigal is highly problematic. She's young, emotionally vulnerable, and Robert has a huge amount of power over her, given that cutting her from the Z-Team basically cements her status as the scum of society. A romance in this context has huge power dynamic issues, and in my mind, Robert is kind of creepy if he allows it to progress. You could argue Blonde Blazer has power over Robert as well, but I'd argue this situation is different, given Robert can still be part of society without his job, and they're more like equal hero colleagues of a similar age with similar amounts of experience. So yeah, thanks for watching this far. All of this, while frustrating, isn't a deal breaker for me, and Dispatch is an excellent game that I will recommend to anyone who likes this sort of thing. If I didn't like it a lot, I wouldn't be complaining about this kind of stuff. So I legitimately can't wait for the sequel.
Okay. Have a good shift. What the fuck?
Visigal look.
Like the frogs from that thing, you know?